Hello, welcome to The Horticulturalists. I'm Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan.
And we post a video every week on a Friday, so do hit subscribe if you want to know what we're doing every week.
And don't forget, we do a Monday short where we answer one of your burning horticultural questions. So pop it in the comments section below and we'll get round to answering it.
We will. He will, obviously. I'll just read it out charmingly. But Stephen, I see a secret garden over that hedge. Where are we?
All right, we're in a town called Trentham, which is about 40 minutes away from where I live at Macedon. And it has a very distinct climate. It has a distinct soil type. It has lots of things about Trentham that are quite different. Some of them positive, some of them not so.
That's gardening, baby. That's gardening.
It certainly is. So we've come to visit a friend of mine that I've known for many, many years, Simon Rickard, who is not only a gardener par excellence, but also a musician and a horticultural communicator who takes tours overseas and does all sorts of things related to the arts and gardening.
Now, Simon is also a horticultural Instagram star, so we'll put his link below, so do have a look. He's got the most incredible garden and it's very seasonal, so it's well worth following and watching along. So, Stephen,
yes,
I am very keen to jump over the hedge, go and find Simon and learn all his tips and tricks of this incredible garden, which is not that old. He's just redone it.
Yes, so let's go meet Simon.
Okay. Well, Stephen, I have followed Simon for such a long time on Instagram, so I'm thrilled to finally meet him and be in this garden. But just for our viewers who aren't that familiar with Australia's geography, just contextualise a little bit, because it's only taken us half an hour to get here from your garden.
Exactly.
But just talk about how different it is.
All right. Well, it's probably not a dissimilar altitude at about 700 metres above sea level. But Trentham is one of those places that rarely gets hot in summer. They have deep, rich, chocolatey soils, so you can almost grow a walking stick here. But they do have remarkably long and often very cold winters. So the temperature can drop well below what I would expect at Macedon. So they get many more degrees of frost than I get. And it can still be frosty, keeping in mind we're in the Southern Hemisphere, well into December, which is in fact early summer for us. So the frosts can come in rather late and they also come in rather early. So you can have quite heavy frosts in mid-autumn. So Simon's given up growing tomatoes. Yeah.
Well, I think Simon's just over there. So let's go and find out more about this amazing garden.
All right, let's. All right, Matthew, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Simon Rickard.
Simon Rickard, great to meet you. I've been following you forever on Instagram, so it's delicious to be in your garden and meet you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming.
Where do we begin?
All right, well, I think we should begin, funnily enough, at the beginning.
As Julie Andrews said.
Yes, and just get a little bit of historical background on Simon and his wonderful garden. So, Simon, when did you move to Trentham for a start?
Okay, I moved to Trentham in 2005, and I'm from Canberra originally, but I moved to Victoria in 2001 to take up the head gardener's position at Heronswood on the Mornington Peninsula.
The Diggers Club.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as I drove down through the very dry northern part of Victoria, just chip dry, and then I arrived in Trentham and everything was so misty, moisty and green and lush, and I thought, I want to live there. Never imagining that I would in the future. Interestingly, as a teenager, I'd bought perennials from the late Dennis Norgate, who had a nursery just down the road there. But I never imagined that I'd move to this place. But 20 years later, here I am.
Here you are.
And the reason I moved here was because of the very special climate which Stephen described. We're 700 metres above sea level here, and this is part of the Victorian volcanic plain. So we actually have the last area of Australia to receive volcanic activity. And for that reason, we have this beautiful deep basalt soil. Having grown up in Canberra, where if you want to dig a hole deeper than 5 centimetres, you need a crowbar. And I swore I'd never live like that again. And so I moved here to Trentham, where we have about 30 metres of topsoil before you hit the bedrock.
So the soil brought you here?
The soil and the rainfall, almost double Melbourne's rainfall. So, as I said, it was lush and misty, moisty. And I came here with dreams of the ultimate English garden. Lots of rhododendrons and things growing around here.
But you moved onto a vacant block, did you not?
I did, yes. This was a complete blank canvas when I moved
Including
here.
no house.
Including no house, which I recycled. The house came from Melbourne and was moved onto the block.
Really? Yeah. Great colour too. It's very Scandinavian colour.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes. I remember you vacillating about painting your house red way back.
That's right.
But
The
it has
Swedes
worked
do.
superbly.
My interior designer cousin described my choices courageous. So
Oh,
I
you
think
love
that probably says it all.
Yes.
Well,
yeah,
there we
fair
go.
enough.
So when you arrived, was there anything here?
No, nothing. It was a completely blank canvas.
Like yours?
Yes, you start off with nothing, and the advantage of that, of course, is always that you don't have to. Well, you don't have to make sort of decisions about what's gone before you. With a blank canvas, you can make all your own mistakes
Yes.
instead of worrying about other people's.
That's right. It's very much a mistake to think that you need to retain aspects of other people's poor choices. So I didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
As Steve
Just your
said.
own poor choices.
Yeah, exactly.
So talking of which, not a poor choice, but so you were talking about that English tradition of, you know,
Yes.
very luxuriant, blousy gardening. So is that what you started with here?
Yes, in this area of the garden, I wanted to have a herbaceous border. This is on the north side of my house with really good aspect to the sun.
We're in the southern hemisphere, so that would be the south in the northern
Yeah.
hemisphere.
And so, yes, I designed a traditional herbaceous style border in here with herbaceous perennials. And we, as I mentioned, we have about double Melbourne's rainfall on average, so about 1,050 millimetres of rain. And I grew plants such as monadas and heleniums and asters,
Usual suspects.
Echinacea, purpurea, achilleas and canna lilies, which are bog plants, and all of those plants did just fine on my natural rainfall. But in the 20 years since I've lived here, the climate has changed significantly in that the rainfall is contracting more into winter, leaving the summers drier. We tend to get big heat spikes now. So a typical summer for us is a summer day would be 16 degrees Celsius, 16, 16, 16, 39, 16, 16, 16. So I find that this climate is now too hot to grow rhododendrons and also too cold to grow tomatoes. So I can grow neither, you know, it's a really specific sort of climate here.
So it's really sort of morphed into a classic Mediterranean climate.
It's what I'd call a cool Mediterranean climate, like mountainous areas of Turkey or Morocco or the Andes.
Hence some of the plants.
Yes, exactly.
So you started off, was there any lawn here? Was there any grass?
Not lawn, there was just pasture grass, weeds essentially here.
So you have your herbaceous garden, it's loving life, the rain starts to decrease. So this garden you were saying is only 3 years old. So what was the catalyst for you to decide something's got to give?
I had the traditional herbaceous border style of planting in here with big swathes of colour. It was all colour matched, big flat plains of colour. You know, things like achilleas and heleniums and asters. I was applying a lot of manures and compost to this garden every year. And as a result, in winter and spring, when the perennials were still dormant, I would get enormous weed growth. Because I would typically go to Sydney to play in an opera season at the end of every year, I'd come home from that and weeds in here would be chest high.
So what we didn't mention is that you are, of course, bassoonist to the stars.
I don't know about to the stars, but I am a specialist in historical bassoons.
There you go. So
He even plays the racket.
I do, yes.
You're only 2 houses from open paddocks,
Yes.
basically. So even if you get your garden nice and clean, you're always going to have more weeds coming in from outside as well.
Exactly.
So you need to manage that somehow.
Exactly right. And those paddocks are on the south side of my house, which is where our prevailing wind comes from. So we do get thistles landing in here all the time. Now, like all of us, I'm not getting any younger. And so I wanted to create a garden which was less work for me. And I guess also bring it up to date with latest trends in naturalistic garden design. And so with that in mind, I completely swept away what was here
And
before.
you quite literally did. You got a machine in and just...
I did, yes.
Yeah.
including the topsoil.
Yes, I removed the top layer of
All those years of
topsoil.
mulching and composting.
Exactly,
In
because
the
it was
bin.
very fertile. And so the planting was extremely lush in here and also contributed to good weed growth, as I mentioned. And so I shaved off that top layer of very fertile topsoil to deliberately impoverish the soil, mulched it with a gravel mulch 10 centimetres in depth. and then did this completely different kind of plant design. So by impoverishing the soil and growing the plants a little bit harder, it makes the plants self-supporting. It helps to outcompete weed growth, and any weeds that do germinate in this deep gravel mulch are very easy to remove because their roots are only growing in a loose substrate.
And do you find too that the plants are slightly more compact growing in this way, so they're not as leggy or as
Absolutely, that's
boisterous
right.
as they might be?
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, in a traditional English herbaceous border, you would see delphiniums all staked and lots of things with stakes.
And lots of mounds made out of hazel sticks to try and hold things in place.
I dislike staking.
Pea twigs.
Yeah,
I hate it.
Unnatural.
My absolute bête noir. I hate looking at stakes.
It's so hard to do it
And
where
so
it doesn't show.
Well, exactly. But one way to do it is to grow the plants a little bit harder.
Exactly.
And so that's been part of the inspiration for this garden style.
Interesting. Well, let's take a little wander down and talk a little bit more about some of your plant choices.
Sure.
All right, Simon, we're standing quite literally in the middle of your gravel garden now, and looking around me, there is plants from everywhere. What was the thing that helped you to make these selections? Because there's plants I can see from all over the world.
Yeah, well, exactly right, Stephen. What I did was select plants from different parts of the world with climates similar to my own.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Australia, generally, there's a feeling that if you want to have a drought-tolerant garden or a climate-appropriate garden, you need to plant Australian native plants. But of course, Australia is an entire continent with an entire continent's worth of different climates.
Of course it is. Yeah.
And something which grows well in Sydney and Brisbane in a humid subtropical climate, summer rainfall, warm temperatures, is not going to grow as well here for me in subalpine Victoria as
Nor
something
would those
from
Western Australian sandbelt grevilleas either.
Exactly. So I've selected plants from parts of the world with similar climates to my own, such as the foothills of the Andes, the mountains of Turkey and Morocco, Southern Europe, California, South Africa, and use those plants to create a garden which doesn't require any water at all. And look, that's not to exclude Australian native plants. One of my favourite Australian native plants is this grass here, Deschampsia cespitosa, which, by the way, is native to about half the world.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not strictly just Australian, is it?
Not. But you can see then also here we've got things like Agastaches from the southwestern states of the USA, Verbenas from Argentina, and, you know, stackies, or not stackies, rather, the Greek tea, the siderites.
Oh, yeah, the siderites. You don't see those around in gardens much these days.
Exactly right, but they're really well suited to our climate, and they're from Greece and Macedonia.
So the plants come from all over the world, but it's not just that the plants come from appropriate climates. It's also about aesthetics, of course. So, you know, how do you make an aesthetic choice when you come down to that point?
That's right. So I've had to marry together plants which are appropriate to my climate, as well as things which I think are going to work aesthetically in this particular context.
Yeah.
So a traditional British herbaceous border, which I had before, has got big flat planes of colour.
Yeah.
You know, the flat flowering heads of Achilleas or asters or Echinacea purpurea. But here I wanted a looser, more naturalistic sort of look. And so I've used a lot of plants which take up a relatively small amount of real estate at ground level, but which come up quite tall and they're open and airy. And so in that way, I've created a garden with a lot of verticals, but it's quite transparent. So as you look through it, you can see different layers of colour into the distance.
It's definitely not greengrocer's shelving.
No,
which is what I call a lot of those borders where you see things planted where you've got your little wee things right on the front and then the next level up and then the next level up. To have something that's sort of amorphous and see-through is far more stimulating and interesting than that layered look.
Thanks. Yeah, and I've done that very deliberately. So you can see that there are some quite tall plants at the front of the border. Salvia yangii, as it is now, is chest high, and then Verbascum, bombyciferum, polar summer here. You know, although that's the tallest plant in the border, I've planted it right at the front of the planting. By contrast, there are some very short plants at the back of the planting, which flower or do their thing earlier in the season. So you can see little short plants like pulsatillas, like narcissus, which flower in the springtime, and then after they finish doing their thing, they get engulfed by later flowering plants. So this is very much a layered planting, going from earlier in the season to later in the season.
And that, in fact, does raise another question, which I'll ask. You talk about early to late season things. how much is it important to extend your season of interest in the border here? Because a lot of people get a border ready for a peak. And quite obviously, you're not trying to do that. So what starts the season and when? And what would be your swan song plant for the season?
Every area in my garden is designed to peak at a different time of year. And this area I think of as being summer.
Yep.
So I do want it to look its best from Christmas until March, let's say.
So that sort of midsummer through until mid-autumn, or early autumn.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But this area starts in October. There are things in October, and it still looks beautiful in April and May with some very late flowering plants, plus all of the seed heads of the grasses and the seed heads of the perennials. So I guess its absolute peak is from Christmas until March, but it has a couple of months either side where it still looks pretty gosh darn good.
Yep.
And we're actually in the season of the year. This is traditionally Jar Jar Wurrung country, and we're in a season now called Wee and Cornmeal time. And this is my most detested season, actually, because what can happen at this time of year is it can be 39 degrees Celsius on one day and then go down to 9 degrees at night. We have 3 metre long strips of bark coming off the candlebark trees, slapping on the roof at night. And you just pray that they're not on fire at this time of year. So it's a time of year which is quite testing for the gardener because it can be very hot and dry or very cold and dry. And it's a season which tests the gardener's mettle, I guess. So I've designed this garden to peak during Wee and Cornmeal time.
All right, so, and it is completely enclosed, so it's a separate thing. Actually, a question we haven't asked, how big is your property?
My property is 2,000 square metres, which is half an acre in the old money. And this area we're in, I think from memory, is about 30 by 15 metres, something like that.
It would certainly be considered a very large front garden in a suburban house. So it's quite a decent sized area. And you're not worried about the area going into a basically complete free fall for the winter? It doesn't worry you particularly?
Well, because I have a relatively big garden with 2,000 square metres, I have the luxury of allowing this area just to be gravel in winter, But I have started thinking about underplanting it with winter flowering bulbs, which will look good in winter and then be covered in perennials when they're dormant in summer.
And I have to say the gravel is what makes the difference, isn't it? If you've got bare beds in the winter, even if they're under a layer of winter mulch or something, they're still bare beds. But when it's gravel, it's almost like the path just gets larger.
Yes, that's right.
It makes a huge difference.
I think the thing that really makes this garden is actually not the perennials and grasses, but the hedge. So very strong architecture, this horizontal line of the surrounding hedge, which is Escallonia Iveyi from Chile, or a hybrid of 2 species from Chile. And, it looks good on its own in winter. I think shapes are more important than colours in garden. So even when all of this summer colour is gone, in winter you can see that the shapes, you can see the horizontal hedge contrasting with the verticals of the pencil pines in the front yard and the shapes of the trees in the background. And of course I do leave the perennials and grasses standing for as long as I can until they really annoy me. And
when they start to look really scruffy.
Then I get them off.
That's good.
Yep, they do look nice covered with frost. We get very heavy hoar frost here in winter, and when everything's covered in frost, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, as long as you can go back inside to the fire.
Well, Simon, here I am knowing absolutely nothing, and your knowledge is extraordinary about the plants that you've chosen. I guess you have, decades of experience in horticulture. So when you came to choose the material for this, did you have to research much? Is there sort of new ideas that you had to explore about the sort of plants? I mean, you knew geographically where you wanted to look, but were some of these things not familiar to you?
There are always new plants to learn about, and it's very exciting when you discover something that you've never considered before. But then there are also plants which you've known for a long time and kind of just, discounted, but suddenly you work out a way to contextualize them. And there are plants that you've hated in the past, but suddenly they've become, you've learned to love them. And one such plant actually is this beautiful red Penstemon here, Penstemon barbatus.
I want to talk about that. So what, you loathed all Penstemons or just this one?
No, because this is so aggressively red, I thought it was horrid.
Right.
But now I love it.
Now, Simon has revealed a great truth about Penstemons, which I want you to share with the world because I didn't realise this. So in my humble knowledge, I just assumed Penstemons were that great dry climate plant that looks like a perennial bed blousy plant that you could use in a drier climate instead of things like delphiniums or whatever. However, you have just righted that wrong. So just talk to us about this particular one.
Yeah, certainly. This is Penstemon barbatus, meaning bearded, because it has a little hairy beard.
Yes.
And this comes from the southwestern part of the United States.
Yeah.
And so it's from a winter rainfall climate. It's from a Mediterranean climate. It's essentially a desert plant.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about it is that it flowers through the summer, the driest time of year.
Yeah.
Most of the cottagey type penstemons, which your listeners will be familiar with, are native to cloud forest in Mexico. So they're from quite high altitude areas in Mexico, which are misty, moisty.
I did not know that. And I always think penstemons are proposed as the Mediterranean dry climate plant, which in fact a lot aren't.
Yes, no. Those Mexican species in particular, which have got really spectacular flowers, and you see in the British cottage type gardens, are drought tolerant by their standards, but they're not dry climate plants. This is a dry climate plant.
Because now you've mentioned that, I must say, whenever I look at British gardening magazines or whatever, and they show penstemons, I'm always thinking, wow, well, it's really wet and cold, so I don't get that. Whereas now I totally do. Obviously, species can have a wide variety of geographic locations, so it makes sense. Now, this isn't the only plant that I made a similar assumption about, because there's two other types. So can we just go and have a quick chat about those, because they equally blew my tiny mind?
Absolutely. Actually, there's one more thing, Matt, I'd like to show you while we're here.
I'm here.
Standing where I'm standing now is a lily that I've just cut back to the ground. And it's Lilium candidum, which is the Madonna lily that's native to the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean in the Balkans. And unlike most lilies, it's adapted to a winter rainfall climate and summer dry. So it grows through the winter, it flowers in late spring and early summer, and then has a siesta to stay out of the summer heat. So it's a lily that requires no water whatsoever. And this type of lily are derived from East Asian lilies or North American lilies, which are from summer rainfall climates. So often plants in the Northern Hemisphere have a version from a winter rainfall climate, a Mediterranean climate, and a version from a summer rainfall climate, like our penstemon here.
Interesting. So I would not have thought to have deep dove into that quite so much. Fascinating. You've actually got quite a few Liliums through here. Are they hybrids, the other ones, or are they species?
Yes, they are. These are all what we call Orienpet lilies, which are hybrids of oriental and trumpet lilies, hence the name Orienpet. And, we think of lilies as being, again, plants of British gardens, but they're actually very, very tough. They're essentially succulents. Their bulbs are water storage organs. Their leaves are very, very fleshy. They're also for storing water. So these are plants which don't require a huge amount of water in the summertime. Unfortunately, in very hot weather, the flowers can burn off very quickly. But in normal summer conditions, they last a long time.
And just for context, we have had 2 swathes of extreme heat.
We have.
A few days ago and a week ago. And probably more coming, who knows. But it's been as hot as hell, as they say. But let's go and talk about the other group of plants that I was quite surprised to hear have a similar background in terms of climate to this.
Great, let's.
So Simon, the other horticultural assumption I have made is that Clematis are a cooler climate plant that need a cool root run, plenty of moisture, and are not heat lovers.
Well, actually, Clematis have got a very wide distribution around the world, including a couple of native species which grow in the forests around here. There's a species of Clematis native to Italy and the Balkans called Clematis Viticella, and it's very heat adapted, so it will grow in very hot conditions. And there are many selections and hybrids from Clematis Viticella, which are really good garden plants. So I've got a couple of them in my gravel garden, and I just let them straggle through other perennials or shrubs to extend the season. This one here is Clematis Prince Charles, which was bred in New Zealand. And as you can see, it's tickety-boo, even though we had 39 degrees Celsius the other day. I probably should also mention that in terms of watering, that all of the plants here are adapted to this climate and won't die if I don't water them. However, I do water this garden before heat waves. So as you mentioned, we've had two patches of temperatures in the high 30s and low 40s. And so in those times I have watered this garden, not to keep the plants alive, not as a life support system, but to cool and humidify this area to the north of my house, so that if any embers land here, hopefully, you know, it's not going to go up instantly. So and also to keep the house cool on those very hot days. And the plants, I guess, are collateral beneficiaries of the way I water.
I am so surprised at how wonderful these are still looking. And you've got a couple of hybrids based on this same species, which have got the biggest clematis-y flowers, and they're still looking perky and fabulous.
Yes.
So I am, again, my tiny mind blown about the variety of conditions. I mean, it's obvious, I suppose, because as you point out, the clematis here it's not the most stunning thing, but it's amazing in context. Great clouds of white small flowers. Yes. And obviously that has dry summers and wet winters. So there you go. Right. But just seeing something that looks so hybridized, I suppose, surviving in a climate like this is extraordinary.
I think the clematis that perhaps most people think of when they think of that genus are what we call type 2 clematis, which have got huge plate-sized flowers. And they're descended from a wild ancestor from Japan, which has got a summer rainfall climate. You know, Japan is like Cairns in summer and Mount Hotham in winter. It's a very different type. We have no analogue of that climate in Australia anywhere.
Now, for our viewers who are not from Australia, Cairns is the tropics and Mount Hotham is our ski
fields. Yes, exactly. Whereas this one coming from Italy in the Balkans can cope very well with dry summers. You know, when you look at the root system of a Clematis Viticella, it's got roots like very thick bootlaces. They're quite succulent and fleshy, and they hold a lot of water.
Interesting.
It takes a couple of years for them to become established and start flowering, but once they're established, they are super tough.
All right, now there's a third plant, similar story. Let's go and talk about that.
Let's do.
So Simon, the trifecta in our plants that aren't quite what I thought they were is this. So talk to us about this.
Sure. This is Agastache rupestris, which comes from the western part of the US and I think northern Mexico as well. So again, it's pretty much a desert plant. It's adapted to hot, dry summers, but it has relatives from summer rainfall climates as well.
So here we go. So there's a consistent theme here, and they are the ones that people will be more familiar with from more communal garden, big box garden centres, or particularly in Europe with perennial planting.
Yes, that's right. There are species native to the eastern US, which has a summer rainfall. There are species native to East Asia as well, to Korea and China. And they all like plenty of water in summer. And from those have been bred these interesting colour varieties that you see for sale in nurseries in pots. But they're essentially annuals. They don't stand up to garden treatment. Whereas this species, which is, as I say, from the western part of the US, stands up really well in a garden context. And you can see the difference in the leaf. This species has a very small grey thread-like leaf as an adaptation to a hot, dry summer. Whereas the ones descended from the summer rainfall tend to have a much larger leaf blade, dark green, and don't put up with sun as much.
Yeah, this is, I mean, and also the form of this, I think, is actually much more attractive.
Yes, I agree. It's quite airy and open, so it fits in with my ethos of having plants which are tall but transparent.
Yes.
A mutual friend of Stephen's and mine made the lovely comment that my garden looks like a coral reef with lots of tiny fish suspended above the coral.
Beautiful
And I think it's the
metaphor.
nicest thing anyone's ever said about my garden.
Fantastic, but there is yet more to discover, so let us dive further deeper in.
All right, I have to say one of the exciting things about going into a garden where you've got a plants person who owns it, so therefore they're going to have interesting plants, is to find something I've never ever met before. And I have to say this little thing here, which you could almost confuse with sanguisorba or something like that, I've never seen it before. What is it? Tell me all about it, Simon.
Well, it's funny you identified sanguisorba because I really wanted to grow this plant as a replacement for sanguisorbas, which need too much water in my climate. This is called Dalea purpurea, D-A-L-E-A.
Yeah, so not
Not
Dalea
dahlias.
like dahlias, no.
That's right.
Dalea.
Purpurea, D-A-L-E-A. And its common name is prairie clover. And believe it or not, it is actually a kind of clover. It is a legume.
I'm still struggling with that. I mean, the foliage I get, but I can't see a pea-shaped flower in that, although my eyesight might not be as good as it should be.
Well,
Yeah,
for
it
a
looks
start,
nothing
the
like...
stamens are exposed, which in most peas, the stamens are covered by the keel.
Exactly, yeah. So it just doesn't look like a legume of any shape or form.
I agree with you.
I've noticed the bees have been having a lovely time with it, so it's obviously a good pollinator attractor. And it's such a pretty nice, neat plant.
It's gorgeous thing, isn't it? It's actually just started flowering and it will go right through until April now.
All right, so well towards the end of autumn.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yep.
And it's a prairie plant, so it's adapted to very exposed grasslands and it has a very deep root system like its relative lucerne. Or alfalfa for our North American listeners. But it's a plant with a very deep root system, and so it pretty much looks after itself. It's fully herbaceous. It dies right back to the ground.
So the cold won't worry it. It'll be disappeared by then.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it is. It's remarkable. And this is about its maximum size, you'd say?
I have read that it gets up to about chest high, but this is only its second year for me, and this is as tall as it's got.
So it's come through a Trentham winter.
Yes.
Obviously with a plom. It's looking fabulous at the moment, even though 2 or 3 days ago we had the best part of 40 degrees Celsius.
That's right.
So it has laughed at both directions.
Yes.
One has to ask, why isn't it around more?
Well, quite so. I think, like a lot of legumes, it probably resents being transplanted from a big pot.
Ah, yes.
I know in North America when they're doing landscape renewal and with prairie plantings, they will plant it out of little plugs.
Oh, so it'll be tiny when you get it.
That's right. But little plugs are not something that the nursery trade really likes to deal in. They prefer 15-centimetre pots.
You can make money out of those.
Exactly. And, you know, it's one of those plants, I suspect, that doesn't transition well from potting mix to garden soil.
Yes.
And so it's probably best sown direct. But for
Which is a bit of an issue for the average home gardener,
Yes.
I have to say. You like to go out and buy something from the nursery that you can plonk in and away it goes. So the plant may be its own worst enemy in a way.
In a way, yes. I mean, I think some of the best plants in my garden, like Pachystegia insignis, the Marlborough rock daisy.
Oh, yes, that beggar of a thing.
Well, exactly. They're hopeless. The nursery industry has no interest in them because they're so slow to propagate and so difficult to propagate. But put them in the garden and they're an absolute doddle to grow. And
I've got one of those Pachystegias in the driveway stupidly at my nursery, and every second person wants one, and I find it extremely difficult to propagate. So I very rarely have them for sale, but being the idiot I am, I keep doing it. You know, sometimes I have the occasional one to sell. So this could in fact be another plant in that sort of
I suspect so.
So it's fantastic. So it's really lovely to see, and I've just got to work out how I can get some and where I can plant it in my garden to see if I can grow it as well.
Absolutely.
Well, Stephen, this is it's not actually part of Simon's gravel garden. It's a gravel drive, and it's different gravel. But a couple of weeks ago, a viewer asked about belladonna lilies.
Yes.
And the fact that when they're dormant, you have an ugly patch.
Yes.
So the question was, is there a companion plant? And your suggestion was, well, no.
No, not really, because they like to have a good baking. And if you plant something over the top of them, that will keep them shaded and cool. So they do need to have that sun beating down on them. So what do?
Plant them at the edge of your gravel drive where it doesn't matter. Now, Simon's going to send me a picture of this area in full bloom in autumn, so I'll drop this in now. But as you can see, it's a really great solution to a bulb that can look quite scruffy and ugly.
Yeah, well, it leaves big gaps when it's in its dormancy. So really what's happened here is when it's in leaf, it makes sort of a little low hedgy sort of effect along the bottom of the big hedge. When it's in flower, it makes a stunning, spectacular entryway to the driveway. And when it's like it is now, the driveway just looks wider.
Yeah.
So it works really well.
And on that point, the drive should be a little bit wider because you obviously don't want to run them over. But it's a really clever solution and a great way to grow them. And then ultimately, you can just collect autumn flowering bulbs along this part of your garden.
You can mix in with other things that flower at the same time, which is things like colchicums, crocuses, nerines. There's a whole range of fabulous autumnal bulbs that you can mix in with your belladonnas.
There you go. Clever Simon.
Yes. Now, this is a plant that, in the general sense, I'm quite familiar with because I've seen fields of flax growing in northwest France. So it's a Linum, but it's not the classical one, is it?
No, exactly. The classical one is Linum usatitissimum, which means the most useful. And that's, of course, linen that I'm wearing here.
And flaxseed.
Yes, flaxseed oil too. That's very true. But this is a Linum or Linum lewisii, which is from the western half of the United States.
It sort of gives its game away by being called after Lewis.
Yeah, exactly right. Dead giveaway.
Yeah.
And it's sort of short-lived perennial, so you can let it self-seed around here and there. And you can see that these flowers are born on these at the end of these very long rods that are sort of a metre tall.
But it's worked its way up, hasn't it?
It
to
has.
An extent, yes.
It actually started flowering in October down at ankle height.
So
and
quite early spring.
It continued right through to the end of January, February.
So it will keep flowering for at least another month or so.
I would say so from the number of buds.
Yeah, there's still plenty of buds on the ends. So do you have to treat this plant in any particular way? You say short-lived. How long do you think you'll get out of it on average?
Well, this one is in its second year. A couple of its friends, which were planted at the same time, kicked the bucket after their first year.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long it's going to last.
But it will throw self-sown seedlings.
Yes,
so you're always going to get a few freebies that come up anyway. And again, it fits all the bills that you've wanted. It's open and airy, it's see-through.
Yep.
It's planted right on the edge of the path, so you walk past it and you've got this fabulous sort of amorphous plant. And if it's going to self-seed into the gravel, I guess, well, most of us buy vegetable seedlings that we get a season out of anyway, so we're used to plants that don't last forever. I do find it interesting, though, something that's potentially perennial. People get annoyed if it doesn't last all that long.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's very pretty indeed. So something that, again, probably wouldn't present well in a pot.
No, I don't think this would transplant very well out of a 10 centimetre or 15 centimetre pot. You know, with plants like this, when their roots touch the side of the pot, they think, okay, these are all the resources I have and I'm just going to flower and do what I can do with these resources.
And get seeded and all that sort of stuff.
And they won't then, their roots won't extend into the ground.
Yeah.
But, you know, even with plants like that, if you can get them going for 1 year in the garden and then allow them to self-seed, then that's probably a good way to go.
And do you do a reasonable amount of also sowing seed within the gravel garden? Or do you let nature take its course to a large extent?
Yeah, the idea is to ultimately let nature take its course. But at this stage, I'm giving nature a little bit of help. And also on that topic, it's a question of removing things, editing things out of this border as well. So I have been deliberately removing clumps which are getting too dense and blocky, and then allowing that space to be filled by a self-seeder like this or another which I'd like to try.
And in fact, that's the art of this sort of gardening, isn't it? Because a lot of these plants would self-seed themselves and you could end up with just this enormous mess of plant material. So to get the appropriate effect out of them, getting in there and thinning and editing is really important.
Editing is exactly the word, Stephen. And a lot of these plants are what we call ruderal plants or ruderal plants, which means plants that are adapted to grow in disturbed soil. So things like the familiar Flanders poppy are a ruderal plant which are adapted to grow in disturbed soil, which is why they would always germinate in the old wheat fields before the use of herbicide. So when you're using ruderal plants, they will self-seed into gaps in the gravel. Verbena bonariensis is another example. And then I just remove the ones I don't want. You know, if it's filling a gap that is useful for that year, it can stay there. If I want the space for something else, I'll remove it. Or if I look and decide that, you know, there's too much of it, then I'll just hoik some out. So you're right. It's very much a question of editing and managing this style of planting on a year-by-year basis.
Fantastic. Thank you.
That's all right.
So Simon, every time we stop and talk about something, there's a story. So in fact, we've taken one step and I would just like to chat about this. So let's just put the camera down for a sec.
Certainly.
So this to me looks like a common or garden chrysanthemum, which surprises me that it would be in your garden, but tell me.
Well, it is indeed a chrysanthemum. It's Chrysanthemum snowdome. And it's a hybrid of two wild species chrysanthemums, one of which formerly was called Agastache pacifica. It's now Chrysanthemum pacificum. And this plant is the last thing that starts to flower in this border. It flowers in April and May. But the great thing about it is,
for us in the Southern Hemisphere.
Well, quite exactly. And but the great thing about it is that it functions as a ball-shaped shrub when it's not in flower. You can see that the shape of it is very neat and formal and spherical. It's a herbaceous perennial, so it does get cut right back to the ground in winter, but then forms this lovely dome in the summer and flowers quite late in the autumn before it goes to sleep again. So this was bred in North America and was imported to Australia by Matt and Mike from Antique Perennials, who I believe you've met.
We have made 3 videos, which we'll link. But you were talking too about the climatic difference for chrysanthemum. So can you just touch on that with this particular one?
Yes, well, in its parentage, it has Chrysanthemum pacificum, which is native to Japan, a summer rainfall climate, but it grows in sand dunes, coastal sand dunes. So it's a plant that's very well adapted to sandy, dry soils.
And gravel gardens. Amazing. All right, let's pick up the camera and carry on walking, because there is something else I spotted, which we've come across once before in Michael McCoy's garden. So let's just very technically plonk our camera down here. This fantastic nodding magenta flower. Tell us all.
It's actually only just started to flower, but this is Calandrinia spectabilis, which comes from Chile.
Yeah.
I've seen this plant growing in the wild in Chile with cacti around it, and also, interestingly, alströmerias. Alströmerias cacti and this thing on the coastal heathland.
There you go. Not a combination I would have thought of.
Exact, together at last. But it is a succulent plant, as you can see from the low rosette of grey succulent leaves.
Yeah.
And then above that come these wands, which bear these hot pink flowers for months and months and months and months and months.
It's stunning, and I love the form, and the flower is so unlike any other succulent flower you'll see. And I love the length of the raceme too. It's really beautiful.
There are Australian native Calandrinias as well in Western Australia, but they're only about 2 inches high.
Really?
Yeah, so this one is quite spectacular.
That's
and a good
bizarre.
garden subject, because this one was literally a cutting I shoved in the ground with no roots on it.
Yeah.
And less than 2 months later, it's now starting to flower.
And our point with Michael McCoy is it's so suited to a lot of Southern Australian gardening, and yet it's just not out there much. So good for you. Go figure. Well, I've got one and it's loving life, as is yours. Mine is in a pot, not a gravel garden. Now, there's one other thing I just wanted to stop and talk to you about. Actually, no, there's 2 more things. The first thing is a plant, I think, that is very fashionable. People often ask questions about it. And I saw when you posted yours in bloom, people always ask you about them. Now they are over, but you still have these incredible seed heads.
Ah, the Eremurus.
So let's just talk Eremurus, because look at the size of that. I mean, how tall is that? Is that 8 feet?
Yeah, something like that. 2.5 meters.
It's enormous. So we've got these very handsome seed pods. So firstly, where are they from? How many did you start with? This is actually a million questions. Have they bulked up? Do they germinate from seed?
Well, these are called Eremurus. Foxtail lilies is their common name.
Yes.
And these come from all of the Stan countries in Central Asia. So, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, the same places the tulips come from.
Yeah.
And these like the same conditions as tulips. But rather than having a bulb under the ground, they have a very wide spreading rootstock just underneath the surface of the soil.
So it's not actually a bulb?
We gardeners think of it as a bulb, in that it goes back, it's a geophyte, what we would call a geophyte. Yeah. So it has a stage of its growth where it hides under the ground and then a stage where it comes above the ground and grows. They flower from sort of late spring into early summer. But even after they finish flowering, you can see these seed heads give quite a lot of structure to the garden.
Amazing, amazing.
These are plants which do need a proper cold, frosty winter.
Yeah.
So up here I go down to -8 in winter, and for me they bulk up very quickly, and they do occasionally self-seed. But somewhere like Melbourne, they're a bit touch and go. It's just not cold enough for them.
And I think it's become one of those deeply fashionable plants that everyone wants, but it's just not suited to so many conditions. I've also read too that it doesn't like being crowded out, so it's actually not a great plant for a perennial border if you did have cold winters, because it doesn't need. Is that your experience?
Yes. The one thing it really hates is being crowded out when it's in its growth phase, which is in late winter and spring, say from sort of July until October, something like that. The way I've planted it here, Matt, is that I have surrounded it by perennials which emerge quite late so that they don't outcompete it when it's in its growth phase. When it's dormant like now, no problem, it can be completely covered. But when it's in growth, it likes, because it's adapted to the steppes of Central Asia, it needs full access to the sun.
Yeah. Interesting. And then at my feet, you're going to have to wade back across, is the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. We might have to squat down for this.
I think we will.
So limoniums are very common in Australian gardens, but this is a dwarf limonium. I've never seen it before.
Yeah, that's right. The perennial statuses are limoniums. This one is Limonium minutum, obviously, because of
what
its
could that mean, Simon?
diminutive size. It is a tiny little thing. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
It's made a bit of a nuisance of itself in Western Australia. So if your listeners are in WA, I wouldn't grow it there. It has become naturalised in some places, but it's been very well behaved for me so far. And it's native to Southern Europe. Classic status with the sort of papery little flowers, but emerging from this really tidy little rosette of leaves. So it's a plant that, you know, I'm intend in the future to just dot round at the edges of the path here and there.
And in terms of its scale, is this it? Will the leaves or the crown get any bigger, or is that it?
No, that's it. So the little crown would fit in the palm of your hand, and then the leaves, the foliage rather, the flowers indeed, are only ankle high.
So in your plant choice, have you looked for things like this, which are low, moundy, with sort of elevated flowers? Because, you know, your point was about having taller things at the front, but you've obviously got to have smaller things. So was that one of your considerations?
Yeah, it was, yes. I wanted to have plants which take up a small amount of real estate at ground level, but then are tall and airy and have a lot of volume at the top. Things which are vase-shaped, or like the Verbena bonariensis here, which are tall but completely transparent.
Yeah. It is such a beautiful garden, Simon.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, Simon, we've had a look at this border in its high season, I guess, but there must be ways you manage it and maintenance that needs to be done. So I guess it would be nice to sort of talk in a point form about, you know, perhaps starting from one point in the year and working through to that point again about what things need to be done in a garden of this ilk.
Yeah, sure. Look, all of these plants are herbaceous perennials and grasses. Herbaceous meaning they don't make woody tissue and they die right back to the ground in winter. Now, all of these plants have beautiful forms in winter, and all of these colours that you see now become biscuits and golds and coffees and bronzes and chocolates and straw, really beautiful shades of brown, and they look beautiful in and of themselves in the winter time. So once the plants begin to disintegrate after I've enjoyed them for a couple of months in winter, then I will cut this area back. And I do that by wading through it with a whippersnipper.
I was going to say, do you do it all in one fell swoop at the end?
This was another consideration with this garden. In the old days, I used to go through with secateurs and
just
individually cut every stem, you know, and I also grew quite a lot of sub-shrubs in here that were quite woody, but I have chosen a plant palette now, which I can just cut back with a whippersnipper for, you know, efficiency.
It's the whole thing.
Yep.
You level the whole thing once.
I wade through it with a whippersnipper and level
brutal.
it once. And I do remove all of the clippings.
I was just going to ask that question. Yes, so you take everything away because you've got a gravel surface here. You don't want to be adding to the humus level and other things by letting things rot down on the surface. And I guess once you cut them down, it will just look so untidy if you left the stuff standing on top of the gravel anyway.
That's right. So another way of managing a garden of this type, but without the gravel, is to do a slash and drop, whereby you would slash the plants and leave the cuttings where they are to be recycled back into the soil.
Which I think our friends at Antique Perennials do, which we mentioned.
Exactly.
Because they have gravel paths, but mulch.
Bark, exactly. They use bark on the borders. That's right. So I don't do that because I want to retain the soil being lean. I don't want to add more humus to it. And as you said, Stephen, aesthetically, I don't want to look at all the clippings here. So things get slashed and then the clippings are taken to the compost to be composted and they end up on the veggie bed or elsewhere in the garden.
And so another point then, I mean, you've mentioned this about reducing the fertility of the soil. So you add nothing. So you don't fertilize in any way?
The only plants I do occasionally fertilise, but not for nutrition, are these Deschampsias, this native grass, which kangaroos love. And they will come into, there's a mob of 60 kangaroos at the end of my street. And they will come into my garden and just selectively eat this one thing every night. So if I throw a handful of blood and bone on that, they're vegetarians and they don't like their dinner to taste of. No.
That is hilarious. So they don't like the smell of blood and bone.
No, they don't want their food to taste like
kangaroo.
Yeah,
well, it probably is.
That's right.
Wow. Now, most of our viewers in North America will have deer issues, not kangaroo issues. So that is quite funny. I wonder if deer are repellent repelled by blood and bone.
Only one way to find out.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
maybe
And
not.
somebody probably already has.
So these do get a feed. But apart from that, I might add a little bit of sulfate of potash because Australian soils are quite depleted in potassium. And most of these plants from the Northern Hemisphere or from younger soils in the Southern Hemisphere need higher potassium levels.
Yeah.
But apart from that, no, I don't do anything.
Great.
But one thing for beginners to think about if they'd like this style
So
of
I
gardening.
want to, yes, if you can just give us some pointers for anyone considering it, because it is quite a thing at the moment, the gravel garden.
Absolutely. I think the most important thing to consider is the type of substrate and the depth of the substrate. So I've used a gravel here. If I could grab a handful. The individual grains of the gravel are very rounded and it has had all of the fine materials sieved out. And that means that it remains loose. It doesn't
it's not going to
pack
pack
together.
down like a path.
So a common product we use in Australia for paths is a thing called Tuscan toppings, and it has very angular particles of gravel and it has all of the clay fines in there so that it packs really hard. And weeds love to germinate in that, and then they're quite hard to get out. It's very important for this type of garden that you use a rounded grain with no fines so that it remains loose, like a shingle beech in Britain, for example.
Oh, Derek Jarman's fantastic garden, which
Exactly.
is a
Yes,
shingle
Exactly
garden.
right.
And depth, is the depth dependent upon your base soil or your climate? What would you suggest?
But it doesn't matter. It does need to be ideally 15 to 20 centimetres.
So that's about 10
inches, 9 or 10
That's
inches.
quite deep.
Yeah, it's very deep, which is incredibly expensive. The plants in here are the cheapest part of this garden.
Yes, the gravel's
The
not.
gravel, sorry, the gravel really set me back. And it's quite thin in parts still. I need to top it up. I've only gone for 10 centimetres here because that was all I could afford, but I am going to top it up this winter. So it's very important that you do have sufficient depth of substrate to perform the functions you want it to perform, which is to discourage weed germination so that any weed seeds that land here will go to the bottom and remain dormant instead of germinating, and also to keep the soil beneath it nice and cool and insulated.
So would you say is 10 centimetres the minimum you could consider?
Yes,
Right.
it is.
Yeah, so there's no point in being mean with your gravel.
No, exactly.
Or
And the
just
plants are
ask for
relatively
some
cheap.
for Christmas. Simon.
Yeah. You can make your own plants, but you can't make your own gravel.
No, interesting. So you caused this amazing transformation of this garden. You completely changed the palette of plants. You've changed the feel, the tenor, everything about it. Any regrets?
No, there are no regrets whatsoever. I'm really, really happy with the way it's going. Of course, I see aspects each year which I'd like to edit, but I think it suits my lifestyle better. It's less water dependent, it's less backbreaking, and I'm very happy with the result aesthetically speaking.
Well, I think we all are. It is absolutely beautiful.
And considering it's only a couple of years old as well. So
That's the wonder of perennial gardens, that it can look pretty established within a year or two.
That's
It's very quick to go. Well, Simon, thank you for your time.
yes, thank you. It's been a fabulous day.
It really has. And if you want to know what we're doing next week, which won't be as fabulous as Simon Rickard's garden, well, who knows? You'll have to hit subscribe.
And don't forget our Monday Shorts. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask me, pop it in the comments below and we'll get round to answering it on Mondays.
And I'll link Simon's Instagram account. And if anyone has questions for Simon, feel free to, I'm sure you'll answer them in your Instagram posts. But until then, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.
Goodbye.